Good morning, Anne. How are you?
Good, Pat. Good morning, Patrick. I'm good. I'm happy that we have had an opportunity to sit down and talk about your experiences growing up because I think it's important that people learn from others, people who have had experiences and can articulate and advocate for those children who maybe don't have a voice for themselves. So I appreciate that you taking the time to sit down and talk with me.
Okay.
So I want to introduce you to who is watching, to the group that is here. Here we have teachers of deaf, hard of hearing, teachers of blind, visually impaired, also some other people groups too, like teachers of developmentally and cognitively delayed. We might have some speech language pathologists, and then also people from the state level. So I'm happy that you can articulate and explain your experiences and share them with them. Are you ready for the questions?
Okay. Do you want me to give my background and my name and introduce myself? Okay. Hello. I'm Patrick Vellia. I was born and raised in New York on Long Island. I'm the only deaf-blind member of an all-hearing family. My family has some signing ability, and they tend to fingerspell or use Sign Extract English, SEE. I graduated from high school in 2006, and I was fully mainstreamed as a solitaire deaf person all the way through. I graduated from college with a bachelor's degree, majoring in American Sign Language and minoring in Business Administration from Gardner-Webb University in 2015 in North Carolina. I've also competed in several different events such as swimming in open water, half Ironman triathlons, performed Zumba during an NBA game, and I've also walked for the National MS Society and had many other experiences and travels. So I moved here to Minnesota in 2019 and I work at Target Field. But now I'm working at both at Target Field, where the Minnesota Twins play, and also Target Center, where the Minnesota Timberwolves basketball team plays. I work as a cook for catering. Then I'm also contracted by the Minnesota Commission for the Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing with the engagement and outreach team. I'm also a web developer and tend to focus on Ruby on Rails, which is a different framework to develop methods to improve accessibility for people with disabilities to improve user experience.
I have a question for you. Do you sleep? Do you sleep? You're so busy!
Maybe I'm a robot.
A
lot of WD-40.
We met where? Where did we meet?
We met at the Midwest Transition Institute, which moves locations to different states each year. In 2019, it was here in Minnesota. We met when Kathy Lyle retired and Anne took her place.
was funny because you were new and I was new. You moved to Minnesota and I was new to the Minnesota DeafBlind Project, and that's where we connected and became quick friends. We tend to text a lot. All day sometimes, and sometimes even at night.
Yes. Do you sleep?
I sleep. I don't know about you. So, what about your shirt? DBSAN?
Yeah, my shirt. Here's the logo. Can they see it?
Yep, they can see it.
Perfect. DBSAN, DeafBlind Support Access Network. It started this last year, 2020, when the pandemic began. A man named Jesse Stanley established it using the Zoom meetings to form a network. DBSAN with the emphasis on N, to help deafblind people continue to make connections. This provided a networking experience because COVID caused a lot of deafblind people to become very isolated. They were stuck at home, so how were they able to socialize? So many people could use Zoom. Anyway, last year Jesse and I began the application process to become a nonprofit organization. Again, DBSAN with a heavy emphasis on the N for networking. Under our project, the N is heavily focused on, and the U.S. government improved it. Our application was for a nonprofit organization.
Yay!
Yes. And we're continuing with the process of our organization. The logo was designed by a deafblind graphic designer, Green LLC. I forgot the name of the company, but they're from Rochester, New York. He's blind in one eye, but wears an eye patch and then is fine. He presented the design during our logo contest, which we received multiple submissions. Then we voted. The globe has hands overlaying it, and then the arm extended under the globe, which shows support for access. We also support the LGBTQ plus community with rainbow colors. But the rainbow has other meanings, such as diversity, including people who are not fully deaf and fully blind individuals. It represents the diversity of DBSAN.
That's beautiful explanation about rainbows and what they represent. They represent the diversity, too. It's because some people who do have one idea about what a deaf-blind person means equals a specific person in mind. I always say, if you meet one deaf-blind person, that means you met one deaf-blind person. So, I'm curious. You said that Zoom, some people don't understand. How does that work if you're deaf-blind? Can you explain that? How does that work in your meetings with DBSAN? I remember you invited me to join the meeting, and I was like, oh, I learned a lot. I learned how to make online meetings more accessible for a wide variety of people. So do you mind explaining? And then how one interpreter is spotlighted to do some copy signing?
Yes, many deafblind people have access to sight. They might have RP, which is retinitis pigmentosa, and grow up with vision that later reduces the field of vision, such as Usher syndrome. They can still utilize their residual vision and can still use Zoom. We set up protocols for communication rules during the meeting. For those people who can't see enough sign on Zoom, we use Google Docs for live notes, and then we also use voice interpreting to facilitate.
Okay, we had some technical issues. The recording stopped. And so now I want you to go back and talk about voice interpreting during the DBSAN meeting.
Yes, we use voice interpreters to feed into Google Docs so someone listens and that feeds into live transcribed in Google Chrome. That helps too. For those who cannot see signing or Google Docs, well, it's hard for us because we don't have financial streams. But some people can find a volunteer interpreter who goes to their home and then does relay signing, but signing what they see. So that helps too. Anyway, okay.
Thank you. I think it's important that people understand that there's options. There's a variety of options for different people. So I'm curious now. You're an expert in using technology. You use Braille and you also enlarge things. I just watched you when you were doing that. You were zooming in on the computer. When did you learn technology? In school? What kind of support did you have? I'm just curious about that.
Okay, so in my second round of second grade, because I was delayed, I repeated second grade. The teacher of BVI, the teacher of TVI, whatever, she started teaching me how to type. Using JAWS and voicing, but not yet Braille, because in kindergarten I started with Braille, and then my second grade teacher, the school decided to stop Braille because I could hear enough and read print. I could do that at school, but not at home. Anyway, I became fascinated with technology and started to learn to type in about 6th grade. I had Zoom text at school, but not yet at home.
I have a question. I'm curious. You said you had it at school, but not at home. Could you expand more and explain more about that?
Okay, most of the time school can't provide services at home. But we found loopholes and continued to use them. Anyway, back then it was sticky, but we figured out how the school could use their license for home and give people their license number to get products. But it became much stricter with nice license numbers. We used to use loopholes, but now we can't.
I'm curious. What about equipment? What kind of equipment did you have? Did you have the same equipment at home and school? So how did you do homework?
Back in elementary school, I had a one-on-one staff support, but not an intervener. She wasn't labeled that. She typed everything for me in 72-point font and then printed it. I brought reams of paper home. Then in 6th grade, I got a new CCC TV after fundraising for home. Then I could finally read at home. But anyway, in elementary school, the staff support person typed everything in 72-point font.
So, well, now that we've done talking about academics, and you're a very social person. I noticed that you're involved with a lot of organizations, and you seem to be an extrovert. You're extroverted. What do you mean? Extroverted. You like meeting people. It doesn't matter if they're deaf, they're blind, hearing. It doesn't matter. You just go ahead and you're assertive and you go up and meet them. So what happened in school? How did you access your friends, peers? Were you more social with family and then you had some acquaintances or some friends? My experience as a person growing up, it was tough. But I'm just curious from a deaf-blind perspective.
At the local school, I had enough hearing and could interact one-on-one, but it was easier one-on-one. In groups, I could not hear people talking. One-on-one were direct conversations and I could hear. But at the local school, lots of conversations happened on the playground, and I was mainstreamed as a solitaire, so it was hard. I did not have friends outside of school. Inside school, yes. Outside of school, it was really iffy. Then my hearing levels started to decrease. The medical numbers, audiograms, stayed the same. However, the function of my hearing worsened. Anyways, at family functions, I get bored and tend to fall asleep because they don't try to communicate with me. There's a lot of chatting and conversations happening all around me. Sometimes I bring my own interpreter or SSP to interpret the family functions. However, I become too exhausted for families' gatherings. Because in New York, the rate of speech tend to be quite fast and people talk over each other. The interpreter can finally interject when there's a pause in the conversation. But by then, they moved on and it's train gone. I asked, "What did you say?" But then the train has already left the station and they become puzzled as to what I'm talking about or asking about.
I understand that. Wow. So I'm curious now. Do you notice? I noticed that you said something that your hearing was decreasing. So how did your teachers or your parents? How did they notice that there was a change, that your hearing was decreasing? What are some signs that you look back and you think, "Oh, I should have noticed them myself"? Well, did you notice that your hearing was decreasing? Were you becoming more frustrated, more stressed? What were some signs?
For my vision levels, at about 6 months old, I would drop things and then couldn't find them. Then when I was about 4 years old, my parents started taking me for testing. I finally got hearing aids at age 6. At school, I started earlier with headphones for an FM system. I hadn't started with personal hearing aids yet. Finally, the school got the behind-the-ear hearing aids with a transmitter FM. Then after that, my family had enough finances for hearing aids. Back then, insurance companies did not cover hearing aids. It's odd because they were happy to pay for cochlear implants but not hearing aids. I don't understand that logic because CIs cost $40,000 for the surgery and then another $15,000 for the processor. Hearing aids only cost like $3,000 per aid. It seems like a lot of insurance companies spend a lot of money that way. Anyways, at age 4, my family noticed that if they voiced loud enough, and back then I could understand a New York accent. But today, after 13 years in North Carolina, I've become more dependent on ASL because a Southern accent compared to a New York accent is so different, and it's a struggle. So I've become more dependent on ASL now. It takes a lot more energy for me to process in spoken language compared to ASL now.
Yeah. I remember when I was born in Maryland and I moved to North Dakota at age 7. I remember thinking the same thing. The Maryland people, they would talk slow. And then we moved to North Dakota and it was like lightning speed. It was super fast. It was hard to understand. So I can understand your experience a little bit. So now you also minored in ASL or majored in ASL?
Yep. In New York, I started fingerspelling in ASL, but then in 6th grade, the school started providing an interpreter, a one-on-one interpreter.
Remember, this is now part 3. So you were talking about school providing interpreter services?
Oh, has the recorded starting?
Yes.
Sorry for the pause again, but let's move forward. In 6th grade, they started providing interpreter services, one-on-one interpreter services from that point on until 10th grade. I had the same interpreter, and then she retired. In 11th grade, I got a new interpreter. Anyways, I still had enough vision and used CL, close visual, during that time, especially for fingerspelling. So during that time, Zoom text was not yet available on our network computer. In 6th grade, I was required to take a keyboarding class, but I couldn't see the computer to type what was on the screen. So the interpreter had to sign copy what was on the screen, but then I would need 3 hands to do tactile ASL. That was impossible. So what we did is we used paper as a background so I could see the finger-spelled letters E, A, S, I. I would watch her finger spell and then turn back to my computer to type. But I couldn't see her fingertips. So that was the only time my interpreter would add nail polish.
That's funny because that's the opposite of what most interpreters are told to do. It's very interesting.
Yes, most of the time interpreters are told they shouldn't add nail polish. But I couldn't see the tips, and I needed to see the tips, so she added nail polish so I could see the tips at close range. So I could see E, A, S, I. You can see the different tips. Also, like N, M, N, you can't see the tips.
I had the same experience, but it was more like with the lipstick. It was hard to read lips, so sometimes people put brighter lipstick on.
So I used a lot of heavy, bright lipstick during a drag queen performance.
So that learning and the keyboarding and also the brailing.
Yeah, I didn't know how to type from 2nd grade, but all students were required to take keyboarding in 6th grade.
Okay, yeah. So how did you then add back the Braille? I noticed that you used like a Bluetooth Braille display now.
Yes, I started Braille again in 6th grade, but I wasn't fully reading it in the classroom yet. In 8th grade, I remember we decided to buy Braille textbooks, but they did not match the publication year. Did you know textbooks, they tend to be printed every year?
Some, yeah, some do.
So back then, they did not match print with Braille. They were not the same. Ugh, it was a waste. So then in college, I figured out how to do it properly. And then I required PDF copies of books. So I used the ISBN and didn't follow the title, author's name, and publisher. No, I followed the ISBN, and that helped get the exact copy that was the same ISBN.
It sounds like it's still ongoing, that you have to figure out things and problem solve and do that again and again, and you have to figure out what works. And now technology has improved. Has that made your life better?
Yes, like I started using the Braille note in high school with a note taker. But that's mostly for communication because it facilitates between a computer and I didn't fully transition, but then in 2012 I got the Bluetooth Braille display, which is worn over my shoulder and connected to my iPad. I use that in school and for reading books from school. And then later, I got an iPhone 5 in the same year, 2012, but I used the iPad because it had, the screen on a phone, not a sidekick. The screen would pop out on
Oh,
the screen would pop out on top with the keyboard at the bottom.
was it a BlackBerry? No, it's different.
Yeah, not a sidekick. So I had my iPad, and my iPad 2 had a cellular that I used for texting because I could enlarge the print for reading and used it with the Braille display. So finally, I transitioned from iPad to iPhone 5 and then connected that to my Bluetooth Braille display, and I've continued to use that.
So with that technology, with the iPhone, with your Bluetooth Braille display, do you notice an impact on your social life and connecting with more people?
Yes, more connections, and it's improved. I can use it to travel. Before 2012, I was kind of independent. Now I can travel everywhere independently. But before 2012, I couldn't really. It was difficult. Starting in 2012 onward, I've had a lot more independence.
That's amazing how technology has provided more access to people. So in summary, soon, do you have any comments or recommendations or advice that you have for teachers of deaf, hard of hearing, teachers of blind, visually impaired, or other people on your team? How maybe they could think about supporting students who need access in the mainstream and in public school?
Well, remember, your students are all individuals. One size does not fit all. It's important to remember that Master Yoda from Star Wars said, "Size matters not. He is tiny yet powerful." So that means you must figure out, test, experiment. If something does not work, something does work. If something does not work, then try another method to help the student. For example, some students are fully blind, and visual learning does not work. But PTASL is more effective because it's more dependent on touch. ASL uses airspace, and that has no meaning for fully blind people. They depend on touch. It requires more thought for them. For example, I know a fully blind person who was hard of hearing. He's a man. He was stuck fingerspelling and couldn't pick up more than fingerspelling, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And his palm orientation was face down. And it was messed up. He didn't have the vision to develop that properly. But with ProTactile, maybe he can learn better. And some...
I have a question. I used a little PT with you today. I did a question mark on your leg.
Yes, that's BC, that's back channeling.
So the question for you is, before your hearing and vision decreased, you were starting and speaking. You're kind of hard of hearing, kind of because you were speaking. And then your vision changed, or did it stay the same? And your hearing decreased and your vision decreased, both at the same time?
Yes, 99% stayed the same, but the functional vision decreased. Like I can see up close with close visual, I can see, but I can't figure out what it is, and then I have to move super close. To an outside person's perspective, it doesn't seem appropriate. For example, in college, I had many female interpreters, staff interpreters, and student note takers. Okay, women interpreters in college, note takers, and staff interpreters. When we were out of the ASL major department, people saw me with the same interpreters, student interpreters, and student note takers, and thought maybe I dated my interpreters. That's from the outside person's perspective. So imagine if I moved in close to look at something. No. So I used proper close visual strategies. But anyways, I developed a new video feature for DBSAN, where you can slow down the video to 1/8 of the proper feed to understand it. But you might need to watch it again and again to fully understand it. Of course, when signing is live, you can't do that to understand.
That sounds exhausting. So I want to take a minute and thank you so much for taking time to meet with me and share your experiences, your stories with teachers so that, they can learn and learn from your lived experiences, plus all the different activities that you're involved in. I just wanted to say thank you so much.
And also to let you know, this is a recorded video for the afternoon of February 28th, right?
Yep, that's right.
If you want to come to my workshop in the evening of the 28th, you can get the registration on the MNCDHH website. It's called DeafBlind 101.
Thank you. What a great idea. Bye.